And there's so many aspects to it, as we talked about. So again, I'm going to really encourage you to go to that public docket. Please, please submit your comments there. They're so important to us, and we will read through every one of them. So if we didn't get to something in topic 1, or if you didn't get to share something in topic 1, please do go there, go to the public docket and submit it there. We also heard some very interesting things that came up during break, which I want to just mention. We heard a symptom that was mentioned that she said, I'm a little embarrassed to tell you this, but one of the symptoms that many patients experience is, because of the chronic cough, hemorrhoids and leaking. So by a show of hands, can we see if others also experience that because of the cough? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, so I see 11 hands raised, but I'm also hearing that a lot of people may not feel comfortable to raise their hand with that. So it's noted that it is a significant, it's something that definitely does impact you very much. There were 2 other questions that came up, and again, we'll do a show of hands for this one. If you were working at the time of your diagnosis, how many of you either had to stop working or you had to significantly alter your work schedule because of your diagnosis? Okay, let's see. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. I'm seeing 17 hands raised, but it definitely sounds like it's a very, very important aspect of this. So, okay. And then last but not least, and I think this is really a place for the public docket again, is one question that we did have raised from the FDA panel was with the fatigue, if you experience it even at rest or if you experience it only during activity. So keep that in mind, and if you can take that and answer that in the docket, it's going to be very helpful for us to read through. Okay? All right, so you can see so many really important considerations that came up in topic 1. So now we're ready to start topic 2. Again, we have 5 panelists here, and they've worked very, very hard to put these comments together, so thank you for that. Topic 2 is on patient perspectives to treating their NTM lung infections. What's working, what's not working, what are the downsides, and what do you look for in an ideal treatment. So that's what we're focused on for this segment. On that, I'd like to get started. So Betsy, we have you going first.
Well, I'm 76, and I've had NTM for 16 years, and probably bronchiectasis for even longer than that. I started with avium in '99, but beginning 2 years later, and until today, I've had abscesses. Surgery was never an option, much too much damage by the time I was diagnosed. And recently, the avium has reappeared and joined the abscesses, which probably is somewhat unusual. I have never had a negative abscesses culture and have never been off an average of 6 to 7 drugs a day, targeting NTM, the bacterial, and fungal infections. My NTM symptoms, and I know from my New York group, my symptoms are just what you all have discussed, and my airway clearance, including the saline rinse, which is a good idea, and my non-prescription meds that are not unusual, so I'm not going to talk about them. As expected, I have lost lung function. My PFTs are now in the 45-65% of predicted range. Drugs have slowed, but they've not stopped the deterioration. And of course, bronchiectasis progresses. I want to emphasize the huge importance of exercise. In my case, training in a gym, plus the usual New York walking, to my quality of life. Exercise is my only secret weapon, and it's the reason some people say I'm better than my numbers. Looking first at Ntm medications, I started off with the standard 3-drug cocktail, clarithromycin, ethambutol, rifampin, but I stayed on this when they added meds for abscesses 2 years later. If I start a drug and can tolerate it, and it's not proved to be useless or to interfere with a drug I need more, I will be kept on it. And the infections being treated are recurrent and chronic. Fluoroquinolones were added in '01, and after Cipro and Levaquin had side effects, I moved on to moxifloxacin, you know it as Avalox, and I still take it. Many drugs have been with me for 10 to 16 years. Now, at times, the drugs for abscesses were stopped because of toxic, sometimes life-threatening side effects. Initial treatment involved IV, IMI, and then meropenem, followed by IV cefoxitin. Desensitization bought only limited time. All 3 drugs were effective, but they produced, for me, anaphylactic-type reactions, and they sent me to the emergency room. In 2006, still searching for something to combat abscesses, I was started on linezolid, and I took it for a full year. I felt great, but I had to stop because I developed neuropathy, numb toes in both feet, which never improved. But it was the most effective drug for my NTM that I've ever taken, and it was an oral, not an IV. I inhaled generic Amicason for 8 months in 2009. While improving energy, reducing cough, and hitting 2 infections, Amicason left me with serious, life-limiting, not threatening, but limiting side effects, which appeared quite suddenly. I now have 2 hearing aids. I suffered severe vertigo initially, and I'm still sensitive to certain stimuli. I made the mistake of riding backwards coming to Washington on the train yesterday. That was a terrible mistake. The damage to my vestibular, which is your inner ear, produces frequent dizziness and poor balance. I'm a fall risk 3 times this year. Now, beginning about 5 years after diagnosis, half of my meds were targeting gram-positive and negative infections, which then became more active. Pseudomonas is recurrent and common in NTM and CF patients. Effective drugs for me were the IV Astronam, taken for 6 months in '04, and the inhaled generic Amicason that I mentioned. Klebsiella Pneumonia is my most stubborn recurring drug. Of no use was IV tigecycline for 11 months in '07, despite high sensitivity in the lab. Augmentin was ineffective, but the inhaled generic Amicason I mentioned hit both the Pseudomonas and the Klebsiella, and it was an enormous surprise that it hit the Klebsiella, and perhaps it was due to synergies with other drugs. Recently, after 2.5 years on nebulized Astronam called Caistin, neither my Klebsiella nor Pseudomonas shows up in cultures. It's unclear why, but Caistin has been a fantastic drug for me. I have more treadmill stamina. Yes, I do treadmill and I do weights and so on. Higher saturation, energy, mental acuity, and I'm clearly stronger than 3 years ago. I no longer take the portable oxygen concentrator to the gym. Serratia was treated by Bactrim from '05, and I still take it. I do wonder if the NTM patient is producing something particular, which is very appealing to all these bugs. Fungal infections have been with me for all 16 years in different forms and locations, treated by posaconazole and fluconazole. Statistics in '99 predicted I should have died years ago. My lungs deteriorate slowly but steadily, but I'm not on any drugs right now, specifically for abscesses, and there are now no new NTM-focused drugs which would work for me that I'm aware of. I know I'm out of time or close. I'd just like another minute to list some ideas for new or improved treatments. Fast approval of inhaled drugs, especially liposomal, whose higher concentration in even my damaged lungs penetrates more than IV. Look at longer-term drug side effects. I mean, I'm on drugs for 16 years, but my Amicason damage occurred after 8 months, 5 days a week. Study of breakpoints in risk would be helpful. Drugs to combat resistance, common NTM infections like Klebsiella, an ESBL producer, or certain abscessive species, like mine, are resistant. Faster NTM species identification by more labs would permit drugs to target specific species. And then FDA approvals should support the resulting new drugs, which will become available from this species identification. Encouragement of treatments based on genetic research, identifying NTM and diseases with relevant profiles and genetic mutation. Is there anything to increase energy without undesirable side effects? How about Ritalin for NTM? Now, 2 studies I participated in could lead to effective treatment. One was a proof of concept, testing whether sildenafil, Viagra, increased ciliary beat frequency, which is too slow in NTM and CF patients, thus increasing lung protective performance. The test was, would the Viagra increase the ciliary beat? It did. This work could lead to strategies. Incidentally, Viagra did nothing for me except it gave me a headache for 2 days. Disappointing. This work could lead to strategies to reduce NTM vulnerability initially and as part of treatment. Second, I participated in a research effort testing interferon gamma against NTM. Immunology could be a very fruitful route. In conclusion, my present level of functioning owes everything to great doctors and the aggressive use of our present multiple long-term meds, mainly adapted from other diseases like TB. Also, my own competitive drive not to let NTM beat me, initially not before I saw my first grandchild, but at age 10 now. So now I'm going for high school graduation. Still, my personal NTM future is not reassuring without new approaches to NTM drugs, which I trust this important FDA conference will encourage. And thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you, Betsy. Next, we have Patricia.
Good morning. My name is Patricia Yost, and I am from Bucks County, Pennsylvania. I am a retired middle school and high school English and theater teacher of 33 years, and I was diagnosed with Mycobacterium avium and bronchiectasis in 1995 at age 38. I have been under treatment, in other words, taking medicines, and dealing with my disease since 1995, as it has always been active and producing positive sputum results. I have never had a negative sputum culture. My medicine treatment for the past 20 years has included many different drugs taken every day and administered orally, intravenously, nebulized, and inhaled in the attempt to slow the growth of the bacteria as well as to minimize the damaging effects to my lungs. Currently, I take clarithromycin, Biaxin, and rifampin to slow the growth of the disease, ipratropium bromide and albuterol to help bring up more mucus and sputum, to try to avoid yet another bout with pneumonia, decongestants to help dry up excess mucus, Prilosec for my acid reflux, Prozac for the negative emotional effects of dealing with a chronic disease, and vitamins and probiotics to balance the negative effects of the medications on my digestive system and the many yeast infections, including thrush. Additionally, I was recently accepted and admitted to the current clinical trial at the University of Pennsylvania for the inhaled liposomal amikacin. So I am also taking the inhaled liposomal amikacin through a nebulizer every day as well. In the past, I have taken ethambutol and voriconazole. However, these medications were discontinued because of their damaging effects to my optic nerve. I had taken Levaquin after a severe pneumonia requiring a chest tube for drainage back in 2008, but that was stopped so that I would not build resistance to that drug in case I needed it again for something. The non-drug therapies for my disease include the daily use of the percussion vest therapy, the use of the acapella device, exercise, meditation and prayer, and my very supportive family, especially my wonderful husband, who's very understanding and helps. All of my treatments have helped in slowing down the growth of the disease and clearing the increased mucus from my lungs over the years. But the disease continues to grow and damage my lungs and diminish my lung capacity. I retired early from teaching and no longer can participate in my theater or music activities because the constant coughing from bringing up the sputum has affected my vocal cords, which is obvious. And the medications cause nausea and increased acid reflux, fatigue, itchy skin, lingering hearing and eyesight problems, restless sleep, and numbness in my toes. Additionally, it is inconvenient to travel, as I must bring my vest and nebulizer machines with me, as well as administer my other treatments twice a day. In conclusion, having NTM and treating NTM is a daily struggle, and has been for me for the past 20 years. As there is no cure, I will continue to deal with its impact and the impact of the treatments for years to come. I hope and pray that something will work to minimize the negative effects and perhaps grant me the possibility of finally getting a negative sputum culture and a reprieve from taking medicines every day. Thank you for your time and considerate compassion to learn the patient's perspectives concerning the effects and impact of the disease and its treatments. Also, thank you for encouraging the research and clinical trials for new medications and treatments to help in our daily struggle for a normal and healthy life free from this insidious disease. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Patricia. So next we have Gabby and her son Arthur.
Good morning, gentlemen, ladies. Thank you for allowing me to speak today. My name is Gabby Qian. I'm retired after running an international business for 30 years. I'm 77 years old and the proud mother of my 3 children. This is my son, Arthur, who encouraged me to come over today to have my voice to speak out for the patients. Thank you, Arthur. He says, Mom, in case you're short of breath, I will continue your testimony today. I'm here today to personally highlight the devastating effect of M. abscesses and to implore the FDA to take steps immediately to advance treatment that existing today, yet are not made available to those who suffer from NTMs and are short on time like me. My full commitment have been submitted for a record, so I will get to the heart of it. Diagnosis in 2010. I have undergone a various of treatment approaches. I have taken at least 10 different kinds of antibiotics, from invade to pills to inhale. Those include C-foxine, tigercycline, Flovent, C-Pro, to name a few. With a little know about M. abscesses, I was like a human experiment. My reactions were invariable, from loss my balance and rushes from across my body from the leg up to each red swallow through the arms and the face. I have a blurred vision and eye pain, fatigue, shortness of breath, sweat, and loss of hearing, and loss of sensation on my lips and my tongue are a few of the side effects I record. This was the only known approach, one that has required me to eliminate trouble, restrict all physical activities, including exercise, remain indoors. At times, I can barely hold conversation with my children, with my friends, with my grandchildren, and so on. I beg the FDA a fast-track treatment, whether they be promising drugs that should be given priority to become clinical trials, to supporting other drugs already in that process. I am also here to tell you we need accessibility of this treatment. That healthcare system is taking a toll on us. I'm currently on triple therapy of antibiotics. Azoxystrobin, Amicason, and Linezolid, Zivax. The project treatment duration, 18 months. The cost of Linezolid thank you. Linezolid alone, a month supply is $6,000. Because my insurance company, United Healthcare, has denied coverage, saying NTM is an off-label use. It cannot approve. My Medicare Part D benefits refuse to cover, as well as the AARP Medicare Complete. Tens of thousands of dollars cash for this one medication that has benefited fully from its patent period. Is that what our government will tell me and my fellow Ntm patients is the best we can do? This, when in other countries, Linezolid is sold for under $600 a month without insurance. I have been taxpayer, lawyer-abiding citizen my entire life. I bid this panel, for we want to live, to use the retirement year I have earned to be with my family, my children, and my grandchildren. Please urgently help me and my fellow sufferings. By making the currently available options like Linezolid attainable and to be a force in urgently supporting, pressing research to help us overcome NTM. Thank you with all my heart. I pray the next time we meet will be celebrate progress. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabby. Thank you so much, Gabby. Next we have Jennifer.
Hi, my name is Jennifer. I was 35 years old when doctors found a spot in my lung, and I was diagnosed with Ntm in December of 2011, and I completed treatment in December of 2013. I went through intense treatment, and I'll tell you about that, and I'm currently clear of infection, although the stories that I'm hearing today are terrifying, because I have been told by my doctor that there's a very high likelihood that I will have recurrence, if not of Ntm, of some other strain. After having a lung wedge resection surgery to remove the nodule in my right lung in November of 2011, I was diagnosed with Ntm, which is considered rare in the United States, so treatment was very unknown. My physicians at Johns Hopkins, which I was lucky enough to go to, that was the first place that I went for treatment. They were able to consult with physicians at National Jewish Health to develop a treatment protocol. Johns Hopkins had told me at the time that they had not seen Ntm since 1999, so they weren't really sure what to do with it, which when you're that young and you're looking to, you're just starting, I had recently been married, it's not a very good outlook for your future when you're being told that they don't know what to do, how to treat you. I had a port put in, and I did 8 months of Amicason Infusions. I did those 3 times a week. It was 750 milligrams. And then I did, on top of that, and then going beyond, I did 22 months of antibiotic treatment, azithromycin, 500 milligrams once a day, ethambutol, 400 milligrams twice a day, rifampin, 300 milligrams twice a day, and isoniazid, I never know how to pronounce that one, 150 milligrams twice a day. I also took vitamin B6 because I developed neuropathy, I believe from the Amicason, fairly early on. My legs, feet, and hands, and even arms would fall asleep in a pretty quick amount of time, which is a problem because my job involved sitting at a computer, so I was constantly moving around trying to keep myself awake. I also took probiotics. I ate yogurt daily to help with my upset stomach, and I started acupuncture. I haven't heard that mentioned yet, and acupuncture for me was critical, and I continue it now. And all of these medications were in addition to my usual medications for asthma, which I've had since I was 7. And asthma kind of complicated things for me because it's difficult when you have shortness of breath to understand whether it's from the asthma or if it's from the infection. And for me, we've talked a lot about fatigue today, and I did have a lot of fatigue, but it hit me after I had my surgery. It was completely overwhelming. I was a very active person before my infection, and it greatly reduced, I mean, I basically became a couch potato. It was all I could do to go to work and then come home at the end of the day, which was a shorter day than it had been previously because of the fatigue. Thank goodness my husband is a good cook, and he doesn't mind cooking because I did not have the energy to cook, and he was a lifesaver for me. He was very supportive. The symptoms that my treatments addressed were, I had a very painful cough. It almost sounded like barking that often left me doubled over. And it was infrequent. So at first I didn't realize that there was something that should be addressed necessarily. I know with asthma and allergies, I have a history of bronchitis and pneumonia. And so you never really know at first before a diagnosis that something is more seriously wrong. The cough went away right after surgery, and I had shortness of breath also. That actually was the first thing that I noticed back in 2009. That gradually went away as I recovered from the surgery. The prescription medications, antibiotics, seem to have gotten rid of the infection for me. And my CT scans have improved, and they continue to improve after the treatment ended, which was sort of surprising to me that even a year later, my scans were still improving after I ended the antibiotics. The vitamin B6 helped with the neuropathy, as well as the acupuncture, which I've mentioned. And the acupuncture, my acupuncturist was addressing lungs, liver and kidney function, which suffered because of the antibiotics. I was doing weekly blood draws to monitor liver and kidney function, and at one point I was told by my doctor that if things didn't improve the next time, I would have to discontinue, I believe it was the rifampin. I can't remember for sure, but, and I started acupuncture actually right after that. And within a week, my liver and kidney function was better. And so I very firmly believe in acupuncture. And I really wish that it was something that was covered by insurance across the board, because I think it is very helpful. There weren't any changes to my treatment regimen until my treatment ended, and it was determined to be effective. I stopped the Amicason after 8 months on advice from National Jewish Health, and I ended all of the other antibiotics after 22 months. And that decision was made after my CT scans showed improvement, and I had a negative sputum culture, which actually, I've never had a positive sputum culture. Unlike what sounds like most people here, I have not had a problem with coughing up sputum. I had a cough, but it was a non-productive cough that was sort of frustrating because they couldn't test anything just to find out what I had, which was part of why I needed to have the surgery, and to get rid of the nodule. Like I said, I currently don't really have symptoms. I do still have asthma, and I always kind of wonder when I'm feeling a little bit worse, is it coming back? The treatment seems to have reversed my disease. And talking about how the therapy improved my ability to do activities that were important to me, I was able to do infusions at home because of my port, and a weekly home nurse visit, which allowed me to continue working full-time, which was really important to me. I barely had any savings at the time that this started. I was pretty young, and I needed to work. And my husband, he works too. We both needed to be working. Washington, D.C. is where we live, and it's an expensive place to live. And working was critical to me. In addition to the fact that I think that if I hadn't been able to work, I would have slept my life away on the couch and in bed, because really getting up and going to work every day was what kept me going.
Jennifer, any final remarks on what you look for in an ideal treatment?
Sure. Let's see. One of the things I wanted to mention was the antibiotic schedule was complicated. Some of the foods have to be taken with, some of the medication has to be taken with food, some has to be taken on an empty stomach. That's difficult, especially when you're trying to travel. And I used to travel, didn't travel as much going through the treatment. I think I've talked about a lot of things. Some of the things about ideal treatment, better upfront communication from the physician about what the treatment entails. And I think that as we hear stories from other patients, it becomes more clear what maybe works for some people and what doesn't. It's difficult because different drugs work for different people. But in the beginning, it was very unclear to me what the treatment would be like. And I was originally told that it would be up to 6 months, and then it ended up being 22 months. In the middle of all of this, my husband and I wanted to start a family, and that is something that you cannot do when you're taking 5 antibiotics, including Amicason infusions. And we weren't able to do that, and we have not yet been able to do that. And that is something that is a big impact on a person's life when a disease impacts that ability to have a family. I think one other important thing was coordination between the infectious disease doctor and the primary care physician was very important for me, because they were great about talking to each other and being very responsive to me. thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. And finally, we have Mary.
Hi, I'm Mary Fisher, and I'm from northern Michigan. I originally started getting sick in 2006 with a cough and fatigue. And to make a long story short, living in rural Michigan, there was nobody that had a clue what was going on, and I ended up with a right middle lobe resection thinking I had cancer, which turned out to be a granuloma, which nobody bothered to culture, and 10 months later I was sick again. I was finally diagnosed with Ntm abscessus in 2008. At that time, they put me on IV Amicason, IV cefoxitin, and oral azithromycin. After 3 months, they removed the Amicason and the cefoxitin due to increased kidney function tests. For the past 7 years, with a few drug holidays here and there, I have remained on inhaled Amicason and oral azithromycin. In 2011, the investigational drug clofazimine was added to the regimen as research showed that it had a synergistic effect with Amicason. Over the course of my illness, I have had 5 cycles of IV cefoxitin, 1 round of IV imipenem, and 2 rounds of tigecycline. Even though my sputum cultures indicated sensitivity to these medications, I rarely converted to negative. To my knowledge, at this point, for my particular abscesses, there are no other antibiotics that are available for me to try. I've also developed neuropathy, nerve pain, and muscle spasms due to the 2 chest surgeries that I had. After the second surgery is when they started me on Lyrica, which had minimal effect. I've had better results with a heating pad and massage therapy. During the time that I had only 3 negative cultures, prior to my second surgery, they started IV tigecycline. And when the damaged lung was cultured, it was negative. However, tigecycline was discontinued due to the low protein and albumin levels, along with decreased blood sugars. 2 months after it was withdrawn, the sputum returned positive. Prior to my diagnosis, I was very active and extremely independent. I cleaned my own home, planted my flower gardens, traveled quite a bit, and took care of my horses. After years of antibiotics, my disease only progressed, and I no longer could do those activities due to decreased energy and stamina. I had to hire somebody to help clean the house, to help with my flower gardens, but when I was told to find someone to take care of my horse, that's when I drew the line. I said, you cannot take away the only activity that brings me the most pleasure. When I feel down or depressed, I will go to the barn or pasture, and just seeing her brightens my day. Spending time with her allows me to forget about my illness for a while. The most significant downsides for me are the timing of multiple medications. I take azithromycin, which you can take with or without food, but they recommend without food for better absorption. I take the clofazimine needs to be taken with food. Omeprazole needs to be taken 30 minutes before you eat. Calcium should not be taken 2 hours before your antibiotics because it has a neutralizing effect. Probiotics should not be taken 3 to 4 hours next to the antibiotics because it will render them useless. I also take another medication that has to be taken 4 times a day. 3 times a week, I need an hour or 2 to take my inhaled Amicason. When IV antibiotics enter the regimen, there are usually 2 to 3 times a day. Finally, I need to incorporate 1 hour of exercise 4 times a week. I echo what Betsy says. My pulmonary rehab and exercise have been my lifesavers. It's very hard to work, plan, and any social activities or get projects done around the house when my days are dictated by all these treatments. The whole process is very difficult and frustrating. I would like to see medications that are developed that do not have so many interactions that require so much time and effort to take. You can have simplifies the process. I would also like to see a medication, if we cannot find a cure, that would at least suppress or put the infection into remission for more than a few months while decreasing the further damage of my lungs.
Thank you so much, Mary. Thank you to all of our panelists. I know we've clapped after each one of you has spoken, but collectively you've all just done such a great job preparing for all of this and being here and sharing those stories with us. So thank you so much. Okay, so once again I'm going to ask the question by a show of hands. What you heard today on the panel, how much of it resonates with you? Similar experiences? Okay, we see about 12 or 13 hands raised. Another few exercises of show of hands. We heard that through the panel that you've had to try many different medications and you've had to stop for various reasons. You stopped for bad side effects. So let's see a show of hands there. How many of you had that experience? So you stopped taking medication because of the side effects. So I see about 6 hands. You've stopped because the medication stopped working. So let's see some hands for that. I see about 7 hands. And then I also heard that you had to stop so you would not get desensitized to that particular medication. But let's see. I see 1 hand for that. Okay. Actually, I see 3 hands for that. Okay, great. Thank you for sharing that. And now we have a polling question. All right. So everybody who answered before, patients and caregivers, let's get your clickers out. Have you ever used any of the following drug therapies to help treat the NTM lung infection? A, oral antibacterials. B, IV antibacterials. C, steroids. D, inhaled therapies. E, other prescription medications such as pain medication. F, other drugs not mentioned. Or G, I'm not sure. Sorry? Yes, you can check all that apply. Okay, so it looks like actually nearly all of you that are responding are taking or have taken oral antibacterials, followed by B and D, so IV antibacterials and D inhaled therapies. And then it looks like we also have a nice range of other ones too, including some drug therapies not mentioned here. What are we seeing on the web?
Similar for the oral antibacterial, but 85%, only 21% for intravenous antibacterial, 46% for steroids, which is more than in the room, 40% for inhaled therapies, and then around 20% for the rest.
Okay, thank you. So what I'd like to do is kind of open this up to any of what you've answered here, but the question that I'd like to ask you is, what symptom is your medication, what is it for, and how do you know that it's working? How do you know that the medication that you're taking is actually making a positive difference? And then we're going to spend some time hearing about the downsides. But how do you know that a medication is working for you? What symptom is improving? Let's see. Why don't we go to... Yes?
Hello, my name is Jean, and I'm from around Dayton. I was diagnosed 2 years ago with MAC, and about a year later with abscesses. I also have staph, which has been my biggest problem. And my treatment, they have not put me on treatment for either the MAC or the abscesses because the staph has been the biggest problem. I was on Duracef for a while. That did not work. And currently I'm on cephaloxime. And I took it for 10 days, and now they have me on a daily regimen with it. And I'll tell you what, I feel so much better. I can work better now. I'm a retired nurse, but I go back now and help them in cardiology once a week for sure, and then vacations and whenever they can use me, and I'm agreeing to come in. But this is the first time in a year that I can say that I feel better. My My energy is better. My appetite is better. I'm now maintaining my weight. I have lost 16 pounds in the last year. Unavoidable because there was no appetite. This wonderful man here made a special trip out for ice cream one night because that's the only thing I felt like I could eat. And I'd call it swallow food. You know, you don't have to use any energy. You just put it in and it goes down. So this is helping me right now. They're not sure if and when are my two doctors, ID doctors. I have one in Florida that I see during the winter when I'm there, and one in Ohio when we're there in the summer. And they are both in total agreement that it's definitely not time, and they're not sure if it ever will be. So I don't know, listening to all of you, it makes me question some of this, but I will say that the doctor that I see in Florida is very closely associated with National Jewish Hospital, and he's offered to send me there, but he said they would turn around and send me right back to him. So I'm comfortable with that.
Thank you so much for sharing that. How about some of the downsides that you're experiencing with these therapies? Can you talk about what it is you're taking, and specifically, what is the downside that you're experiencing?
My name's Laura. In 2006, at the age of 46, I was diagnosed with NTM, and then 1 year later, I entered the Ntm study at the wonderful National Institute for Health. While I was there, I discovered I was also a ZZ alpha-1 antitrypsin deficient patient. So I started on the cocktail of 3 oral antibiotics, every one which has been mentioned up here: linezolid, ethambutol, rifampin, azithromycin. And after 5 years, they added clofazimine. And I never had any serious side effects, upset stomach. I was very fortunate. I tolerated them. But after 6 years, and I'm up to 4 oral antibiotics, I have peripheral neuropathy. I have hearing loss. I have ringing in my ears. What else? My FEV1 when I was first entered in the study was 92%, and I'm now down to the mid-70%. So the drugs just weren't working. But then in 2013, I entered the clinical trial for the inhaled form of liposomal form of Amicason, and 60 days later, I cultured negative, and I've cultured negative ever since. So that's kind of the negative and the positive of what the oral antibiotics were doing for me, and then how positive the inhaled therapy has worked for me. And I actually have a sputum sample up the NIH this week, and keep my fingers crossed I'm still negative.
Great to hear. Thank you so much. And your name, sorry?
Laura.
Laura. Thank you, Laura,
Yeah,
for your
thank
comment.
you. Thank you for this meeting here.
So I do want to do a show of hands here. Laura, you mentioned that the inhaled therapies are working. Is it that the inhaled therapy is working better for you, and is it easier for you to also to take the inhaled therapy? Or Still can't hear? Okay. So, okay, go ahead.
Okay, so the inhale therapy was not that difficult. It was a little tedious because there was a nebulizer you had to keep clean, and I traveled for my job, and so I had to take it with me on an airplane and do it in a hotel room, and then sterilize the equipment. But it was very effective. I mean, within 60 days, I was culturing negative.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. But what I did want to do a show of hands for is that we've heard a range of downsides. We've heard neuropathy from several people, and I just want to do a show of hands if others also experience that as a significant downside to the treatments. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. See about 8 hands raised, 9 hands raised for that. I've also heard mentioned vision loss, hearing loss. Again, others with that also? 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I see 11 hands there. Okay, so let me check in with the web quickly and see what we're hearing there.
Sure. We have 130 participants now on the web and a very active conversation. Much echoing what we've heard in the room, that some people stated that they know when the meds are working because their cough is not as deep or the choking mucus sort of eases up, but just as many participants are saying that they have no idea that the drug is helping them. They only know when they go in to go get their lab results, and that's when they know that it's actually helping them. Lots of talk about vision and hearing loss, and then some non-drug therapies mentioned include behavioral changes, adding postural and nutritional behavioral modifications, and there's some talk about a hypertonic saline solution as well.
Okay, great. Any other comments on either the therapies that are up here or a drug therapy not mentioned? What you've experienced? What was that therapy? How did you experience it? What was the downside of it?
Hi, my name is Debbie Brzezlowski, and I would like to say a couple of things. I'll keep it short. One is I was on inhaled Amicason as well as IV, and I found that I was able to tolerate the inhaled much better than the IV. In fact, I had to be taken off the IV because of tinnitus or ringing in the ears. So perhaps maybe there should be a focus, if there has to be, on inhaled, which goes straight into the lungs rather than any other type, not to say we want to discard anything else. But the other thing I would like to bring up is that I know that we have some really tough side effects from some of these meds. And I'm probably speaking for many people in this room, but probably not everybody, depending on what the side effects are. We're in a situation right now that we have limited options. And I, for one, would take the side effects of these drugs or of any other new drugs, knowing that there are no other options and knowing that the progression won't go any further than what it is or progress slowly. So I just wanted to mention that because these side effects are tough, and I have to say I've had many myself, but I've just stuck with it. Probably they weren't as bad as some other people's descriptions, but I'd just rather have the drugs than not have the drugs and not fear that I'm going to get really bad in the future. So I wanted to make that point.
Thank you for sharing that. And in just a few moments, we will talk on a similar issue. We're going to have a scenario that goes right into that, what you just brought up. Yes, we have one comment here.
I'd just like to say there's 2 fairly non-invasive medical therapies that really helped me. I was told if I had bronchiectasis to get a test for a sleep study.
And I had sleep apnea, and so CPAP really helped with the fatigue, even though I still have fatigue. 7% saline and the Arabica that I was told about at National Jewish were extremely helpful for immediately bringing up mucus, and then just amazing for me. And then weight training reversed my osteoporosis, and food. I avoid dairy, and I don't know if it's the lactose. I really would like a study on dairy and inflammation for the GI and lungs.
Thank you so much. Any other yes, we had one.
Hi, sorry, it's me again. I'll make it quick. I did probably the 3 that we all start with, the rifampin, the azithromycin. By the way, that may have orange. It's totally orange. I mean, there's no way around that. There's weird side effects. But you do that. I then keep getting the sputum samples and then went on the inhaled Amicason. And for me, it was awesome. In the clinical trial, I had a little nebulizer I could travel with. I just put that thing. You could go through TSA. You bring your drug stuff. You can travel with that puppy. It was great. So for me, the inhaled Amicason, way to go. The better symptoms were, yeah, I produced a lot of phlegm, but then afterwards, I got the clean sputum sample results. Yay, I got a negative. and gained 10 pounds. Boom. It was like the weight came right back on. So that was great. And it wasn't like I changed my diet or started eating it. So the NTM was obviously yummy eating that. But one other thing I'd like to bring up is I love the goals Phil put out, which is he had 3, which was really nice. He was like extended life, quality of life, and less toxic drugs. The one other one I'd like to add, because it's not even on the agenda, early diagnosis. Every single one of us will have stories. I went 10 years before, bronchiectasis diagnosis, and I had 10 years before the NTM. And people send sputum samples out. They don't have the right paperwork. You don't know where to send the sputum samples out. Earlier diagnosis, I think, will definitely help, because everybody's like, oh, you're so young. I think I'm going to check my white privilege here. I have good health insurance. I kept going to doctors. People saying, oh, it's TB. Oh, it's cystic fibrosis. Oh, it's this. I kept going. I think there's a lot of other people outside of my demographic that have these sorts of diseases. Earlier diagnosis and better diagnosis, I think, could really help. So there.
Thank you for sharing that. So I'm hearing a lot of people say that inhaled therapies have worked a little bit better for them than the oral therapies. Okay. Let's take one more comment.
I'd just like to echo what Gabby was saying about linezolid. I am fortunate to be a nuisance to my insurance company and my employer, who provides lifetime and health insurance, for which I am very grateful. But I did not get my linezolid covered without a major, major battle. And I am also fortunate not to be on Medicare yet. And yet linezolid was the only drug that my sputum sample showed was going to be effective. And I think it's crazy that those sorts of medications, because they're off-label, won't be covered. I fought a battle, and it cost me $300 a month as opposed to $2,500, and I would have paid out of pocket. But not everyone's in that position, and you shouldn't have to fight for medicine that medical tests show should help your disease.
Thank you for sharing that. And your name?
Debbie.
Debbie. Thank you, Debbie. Okay. So let's do a quick polling question. We've heard a lot of other therapies that you're also using, such as acupuncture. But I do want to make sure we get to the next polling question. And then we won't spend too much time on it. We'll go into the scenario question where we're going to hear your thoughts on if you would participate in a hypothetical trial given some data. So let's answer this question so we have the results recorded, and then we'll go forward. Besides your drug therapies, what else are you doing to manage any symptoms you have experienced because of your NTM lung infection? A, cough medicines. B, supplemental oxygen. C, pulmonary rehab. D, breathing exercises. E, dietary supplements. F, diet modifications. G, complementary or alternative therapies. H, other therapies not mentioned. Or I, I'm not doing or taking any therapies to treat symptoms. And while we're answering that, I'm just going to put a plug-in for those on the webcast. If you're interested in sharing some comments on ideal treatments by phone, we'll check in just a little bit. Okay, so it looks like over half of you in the room are doing some breathing exercises or relaxation techniques, dietary supplements, and then it looks like we have a good range of everything else too. Pulmonary rehab, diet modifications. Okay, great. What did we see on the web for this?
For cough medicine, supplemental oxygen and pulmonary rehabilitation, around 15% for each. 53% breathing, exercise, or relaxation techniques. 56% dietary supplements. 40% diet modifications and alternative therapies, and then 20% therapies not mentioned.
Thank you. Okay. So let's go to our scenario question. Okay, so I'm going to read this out loud in just a second, but the scenario question is we're going to present you with this scenario regarding a clinical study, and we're not giving you a lot of data here. This is just a hypothetical, but what's important to us is some of the first considerations or questions that come to mind. We want to hear what those are. And then I know, like I said, in the afternoon we're going to have a discussion on clinical trial design. But for now, we want to hear your immediate thoughts when you imagine that you've been invited to participate in a clinical trial to study an experimental antibiotic treatment for NTM lung infections. The purpose of this study is to better understand how well this treatment works and its safety. The clinical trial lasts 2 years, and clinical visits will occur every month for 2 years, in addition to your regular doctor's visits. These visits will involve monthly sputum collections, lab tests, lung function tests, and other lab tests as needed. Treatments may involve either IV medication or inhaled therapy, and treatment will be given in addition to your standard of care. So, given just this amount of information, what thoughts or questions come to your mind when you hear this scenario? And it can be anything. What's the first thing that comes to your mind when you see this and how you would consider participating?
Probably the first question comes to my mind, since I've been on IVs and I've been inhaled. Why 1 to 2 hours?
So why is the IV?
Why the length of time?
Okay. Why that length of time?
I'm not saying I wouldn't do it, but why that's the first thing that
Sure. Okay. Thank you, Deborah. Philip?
Patients not already on IV, in order to participate in IV, they're going to have something inserted. I can't see. That seems very, very challenging to me.
Okay. Thank you, Philip. Other thoughts?
Do I have to stop the meds I'm currently on to participate?
Okay. Do you have to stop the meds that you're currently on to participate? I saw a lot of heads nodding for that. But it's in addition to your FDA panel. You'll have to chime in here. This is in addition to the standard of care. So you wouldn't be stopping, right? Is that what I'm understanding? That's what it. Okay. Okay. But good question. Thank you for asking. We have another. Sorry. Yes, Patricia. Is your mic on?
Sorry. Oh, there we go. Sign me up.
Sign you up. Got it. So you're willing to, so regardless of the risks that have been identified, you want to go ahead and take, okay? And we'll take one more comment.
I'm going to say this from a practical standpoint because I try to recruit patients. Having patients come who live 50, 100, 150 miles away every month is almost impossible. Many of these people can't drive by themselves. They have to have someone come with it. That one marker, which is often required for these studies, often will take out at least 2/3 of the potential patients because it's not a practical possibility, just because of the complexity of their disease and how far they live away. This is an issue for every orphan disease, where everybody doesn't live in the same town where the study's being done.
Thank you. So the burden of how frequently you'll need to go in. Okay, I see several more hands raised. Let's take.
So the visits are monthly. How often are the treatments administered?
Okay, so how often are the treatments administered? Okay. And then let's just take one more comment and we'll dive into ideal treatments.
Yes, addressing this gentleman's comments, if various centers were, most of my clinical trials have been at NIH. I live in New York. It would be a major hassle. I go regularly, but not once a month. But if my New York doctor could administer whatever, it would make a huge difference.
Okay, so if your current doctor could, or the one that you go to, if you could get
my New York doctor rather than my NIH doctor.
Okay,
we talk to each other all the time anyway.
Thank you. So it looks like there's definitely a lot of considerations here, and I'm going to ask that you please submit those considerations to the docket, just so we can move on.
May I say one more quick thing? I was wondering, and there were times I'd like to participate in a clinical trial, and there's many of us that live in the Northeast, let's say, for part of the year, and then they go to Florida or California. So I was wondering if the clinical trials could be set up where you can switch locations and the centers could share information or pass it on.
Okay. So it definitely appears that the travel to this and the burden of getting to the doctor is a major issue. Okay, so I know we're approaching lunchtime, so I do not want to keep you very long. But do we have anybody on the phone, Graham and Magna?
Operator, can you open up Cynthia's line?
So we'll take one comment on what you look for in an ideal treatment.
Cynthia, your line is now open.
Hi, Cynthia.
Thank you. Hi. An ideal treatment for me would be one that does minimal harm. I kind of think of antibiotics as shock and awe for us, and they're absolutely essential, and thank God we have them. But I know many of us suffer from other health issues. I myself have osteoporosis and Sjogren's, and some of my meds, the Typicort and corticosteroids that we take, lessen the bone density, and I'm kind of really worried about getting frail bones, and exercise seems to be key to staying well with this illness. And I think it's poorly understood how a long-term effect of the use of these toxic antibiotics on our overall health. And so I'm hopeful that in the future they can look to biologics and cellular mechanisms to weaken the tough cell wall that keep meds from getting at the bug, so that we could perhaps really make that shock and awe much more effective, so we have to take it for shorter periods of time and less toxic drugs.
Thank you, Cynthia.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia. So drugs with minimal side effects, I heard, and exploring biologics. Other thoughts on ideal treatment, what you look for? Yes.
Hi, I've been a patient for 10 years, and I've been treated for MAC. I've been treated for abscesses twice with IVs and orals. And just for the record, I went to National Jewish in February after 8 years of being urged to do so by my doctors at Johns Hopkins. And I was treated by Dr. Drummond with lifestyle changes and exercise and a nebulizer. And I just got back 2 weeks ago and had the first time I had a CT scan improvement without drugs. And I am eternally grateful to Dr. Drummond for that. But my ideal treatment has to do with something that's being advertised in magazines as lung treatment, and that is stem cells. And I've heard no one mention that. I've taken it to my doctors. They don't know that much about it. I would like to know what the status of it is. It's being practiced throughout the country at multiple locations by a group called the Lung Institute. And I have spoken with them. It sounds like the greatest thing since sliced bread. They take your own stem cells and they transplant them, and supposedly it helps your lung function and the a repair of your lungs. So I'd like to submit that for consideration. I'd like to know any comments or responses about what it is and how it fits in with the FDA plans and what's known about it.
Thank you so much. And your name?
Lynn Bonberry.
Thank you so much, Lynn. Okay, another comment on ideal treatment? Yes. Carolyn, this mic is coming to you.
Thank you. This dealing with the sleep issues when you're on medications, I think, is underrated. It's one of the most important things for me. And I've realized as time has gone on that those 5 years, I hardly ever got a good night's sleep. And part of the reason is because there does seem to be some diuretic action. I'm not sure which one it comes from or whatever, but I was up peeing at least 5 times a night, and it's really difficult to get back to sleep. So you are sleep deprived, at least most people that I know and myself, and if they could come up with some kind of medications that were effective and that you could still get some sleep, and you're supposed to get so much more sleep when you have this disease. You know, because you're weary all the time, and that's part of the fatigue, is that you never get a good night's sleep. 5 years on no sleep is pretty difficult and psychologically a huge problem.
Thank you, Marilyn. So we are approaching closing, but I do have a question for you as a show of hands that I know the FDA panel identified would be helpful for them to know is, how many of you have had to take a 6-minute walk test as a way to measure the progression? Let's see. How many of you have taken a 6-minute walk test? Is there a different name for it, or is that the name? Okay, that's the name. All right, so just keep your hands up for a second while we do a quick count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. I'm seeing 19 hands raised on that one, so it does seem that way. And just very quickly, which symptom gets in the way of you not being able to maybe do your 6-minute walk test as well as you would like? Is it like the shortness of breath? Is it the stamina? Okay.
Tomorrow it rains and your 6-minute will be off, so it's really not a valid test.
Okay.
In my eyes, I don't.
Okay.
Some days I can walk forever, and some days I can't walk a block.
Okay. Okay. So I'm hearing stamina, and take one more comment.
Yeah, it's just a comment. I have cold hands. The finger measure of blood oxygen doesn't work. Okay. And hence, unless everybody starts getting the thing that sits on your head, it's just not valid. And I can't do it in the gym because the reading falls down to 95, 96. I mean, if you want valid measurements, then this equipment has to be available.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you. Any final questions from FDA? I really don't want to take up your lunchtime. No questions? You're all extraordinary. Thank you so much for sharing these stories with us. We've learned so much from you, and please submit to the docket to continue this discussion. So thank you. Oh, we'll reconvene at 1:10.
So this is like the main screen, right? So it gets the phone, you go here, this is how you mute the phone, okay? So get to the lectern mic, go to setup,